welcome to episode I don't even know of the podcast.
Five,
Episode
five.
5? Yeah, that's what I thought. I was gonna say that. I'm your host, Max.
I'm number two host, Addy,
I am number 3 host, Veronica.
and today we have very special guest with us, Forrest. Please give a warm welcome to Forrest. Hello, Forrest. Thank you for being here with us.
Hey, I'm excited to be on this new podcast. Very cool.
Yes. So we mentioned somehow Forrest gets mentioned every single episode. So now we finally have you here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. You're just
Can
such a
have you on
presence in our lives.
Exactly.
bless.
It's such a big presence. Yeah. So Forrest is actually a I'm just gonna say X-year student
True.
at the Carleton, also studying computer science. And we have some very interesting topics to talk about with him. And yeah, so before we get into it, anyone want to say anything? Any announcements?
Yes,
Okay, take it
I
away.
would like to say that Boris Jefferson Christoph Anderson is my favorite Carleton student. Now take it away.
Okay.
That's impressive. I
I
thought I was
don't know
about to
how.
get doxxed there, but
Yeah.
then Veronica didn't say any of my names right. And so
Yeah.
Oh. Come on.
Nobody knows your real name, Forrest.
Yes, indeed.
That's a little. Someone can say Forrest's name. That's a talent. It's a flex. All right. Okay. So, we'll get right into it. How did you decide to study CS?
I think when I was pretty young, so let's say like 4 or 5. Like my dad got this Lego Mindstorms kit, and it was one of the old ones. There's like you got like the EV3 and like the NXT. Those are like the recent ones, but this one was the RCX. And so I remember when I was young, I was able to like play with it, and it was like this kind of Technic set where you're able to build like robots and stuff like that. And then they had this programming language that was block based, and so you could like drag a block and that would say like rotate this gear this much or something like that. And so that was my first exposure to like getting a computer to do something that you told it to. And then it actually took me a long time to figure out that I wanted to go into CS. I remember when I was in high school, probably grade 9 and 10, I thought I wanted to be a mathematician because I was like really excelling at math, and I was like doing really well, and I found it really really fun. And I had come up with these like what I thought were like amazing groundbreaking proofs to math problems, which turned out to be like greatest common divisor solutions, and they weren't even good at all. But from that, I made a program
Yeah.
in which it like tried to like just count up to like 100. I'm like, this is groundbreaking. And then I think I got into coding when I was like about 11. I found this book called Programming for Teens, and I remember that I was 11 because I remember I saw it at the library. I'm like, I'm not even a teen yet. This is gonna be amazing. And then I made it through the entire book. And I learned a lot about like graphics and putting stuff on the screen and stuff like that. But I could not for the life, like I went back and read it so many times, I could not figure out what an array was. I could not conceptualize this idea of having a variables in a list. And
Me
it's
a
so
few
odd
months
because
ago.
yeah, well, because like a lot of people coming into CS will have this type of thing where there's these concepts that don't really appear anywhere else in like the world, and so you don't really need to like practice them or employ them. And then when you're presented with these ideas, you don't really have a reason to use them. So another example is like dictionaries. A lot of people have trouble with dictionaries in first year, but and then since then I've just been doing more coding projects on and off, made a few games here and there. But then I think it excelled a lot when I came to Carleton because I come from a very small town. There's no tech. And so I was super lucky to have a programming teacher and to be able to learn programming in high school. But I was incredibly like limited from what the tech universe was. And so coming to Carleton definitely excelled everything a lot more.
That's pretty cool. And like it's pretty interesting because like we've talked like a lot. Like Forrest is kind of like our resident expert when it comes to like CS stuff. And so like we always talk about like whenever we have any questions or anything like that, we always like he's the go-to guy. But like I've never actually heard the story of like how he even got into it. So that's pretty interesting that it started with Legos and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
ended up being something huge.
It's
Uh,
interesting as well that you came from like a small town with virtually no tech and you had a CS teacher there.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
I doubt I would have went into CS if I was in like a smaller, more rural area.
Yeah, it's definitely more difficult, I think. Or you'd go into it as a program that like some math, you like computers enough, and you might go into it but not really know anything about it. But I think that there's a lot of other places in my life that I was also exposed to, like these types of concepts, or at least these ideas. Like growing up, my dad, he would always like listen to like security podcasts, like Security Now. It's this podcast about like what's going on in the cybersec world. And so I remember hearing a lot about that kind of stuff and not understanding at all what they were saying, but being exposed to this in some capacity. And then further, like pretty much all the computers we had at home were computers my dad would bring home from the hospital, because that's where he worked as like an IT guy. And so he'd bring home these computers. We'd have like servers lying all over the place, and all like a lot of them, any ones that were turned on, like if it came with Windows, then we might have like Windows XP or Windows 2000, but we never like bought Windows or anything like that. But we'd have like a ton of different versions of Linux, always like on like these different computers. And since my dad had like so many monitors that he could just bring home and stuff, like there was like a computer for each of like my brother, my sister, and I. And so um, I think being exposed to this in like an unconventional way, and I should also mention we had dial-up internet, so I was not able to do much on the internet. I had to basically figure everything out for myself on the computer.
Yeah,
So
our
yeah,
generation never experienced dial-up. Maybe Addy did, but I never. I hear
How
the memes with like the dial-up noise, and
yeah,
I didn't understand what it was about for a while.
yeah, like I didn't grow up with dial-up exactly, but like kind of like the phone line and the internet was kind of like on the same type of connection. So there's that. So it's like similar enough.
Hmm.
It wasn't exactly like the whole dial-up like situation that you had to go through. So I've never actually experienced that. I think I was kind of like on the edge.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty interesting because like
So, Forrest,
yeah,
would
go
you say that there was like always kind of like a certain level of like curiosity with computers because of your dad, or like what he like because of the
yeah.
things he brought in?
I would think curiosity, absolutely. For some reason I remember that we never actually built a computer. Like the first time I built a computer was when we moved into like the town that we were in, because we used to be in the country. We moved into the town. I got like a job, and I was able to like buy my own computer parts and build one, which is kind of odd, because I remember like if we had that many computers, then I'm surprised we didn't do like as much opening and like examining. And I feel like we did to a certain extent, but maybe it was just the technology was too old. But I think being exposed to this in the capacity of like there's a picture of me when I'm a baby, and I'm like lying beside my dad. I'm probably like maybe one, and he's like reading like this like Linux magazine or something like that, and I'm like staring intently at the pages. And so of course I don't think there's like osmosis from that or anything like that, but just having the environment where it's a thing. And I remember my sixth grade yearbook, I didn't have any, like it was like who's your superhero, and I didn't have any, but I remember hearing a lot about a man named Linus Torvalds, and so that was who I put for my grade six superhero. And I
Wow.
feel like you all don't know who that is, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know
I
who
do,
that
I do,
is.
I do.
You will all
But
learn.
like, yeah, you'll learn eventually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because also like I mean this is not necessarily true, but like I like to think like if you kind of grew up with Linux, like you're already kind of like better than most people they are at computers.
Oh
Just
yeah.
kind of working with Linux, I feel is like already uh I guess it can be flexed on its own.
Yeah, wait, Forrest, explain that to us. Like, I know you're sort of a Linux elitist. I have used Windows my entire life, and all I know about Linux is that like the whole thing is like basically just like a file explorer.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because so for me to be like I would definitely say I'm like an elitist about much like very different things than Linux. So Linux I do like, and I do like it as an operating system for development and gaming and everything like that. I think it works pretty well. But compared to a lot of other people I know, like I'm not even close to like the boundaries of where Linux can go. Now, as an operating system though, when I was young, I remember that I was never I would never use a terminal more than I know how to use the Windows terminal to like ping Google and do whatever, like traceroute or any need or anything like that. But I would never use a terminal. Instead, we would just use Linux for like if we had a school project and we needed to use a word processor, we use like OpenOffice to do what we needed. And so effectively, we used it as an operating system for your everyday productivity, and then any like GNU games that would come with it. So I remember there was like some platformer games, there was some maybe like dungeon games and stuff like that. I remember playing that a lot. But when I came to university, it wasn't until third year that I actually changed my Windows laptop. I have like this Republic of Gamers like Windows laptop that I would use for all my courses, and I would stand behind like, oh, Windows best, like amazing operating system. Visual Studio is a beautiful IDE. I love using it so much. The ecosystem on Windows is amazing. It allows me to do all the development I want. And then it wasn't until third year that I actually tried like dual booting Ubuntu again. And then from there, I tried going into like different operating systems and stuff, and I made a lot of mistakes that, and I think the one lesson that I've learned really well is that I back up my stuff in like super religiously, because I brick my hard drives like once every 3 months when I'm trying to install stuff. And so if my partitions are gone, then it doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm able to like duplicate everything. But that being said, it wasn't until like a long time into my university degree until I started actually using Linux.
I see. Okay, so like you weren't always kind of that passionate about it, I guess I can say. Like not passionate, just like not like Max was saying, elitist about it.
Well, I think it is definitely a lot of passion though, because when you're
Yeah, yeah.
using like the Linux kernel, and when you have access, so Max described everything as a directory, and so I think a better way to describe it is that everything in Linux is a file essentially. Anything that's on the hard drive, whether it be a device, an application, anything like that, is all just files, and you can go browse all these files. And so when you look at how Unix and how different like distros do stuff for developers, especially, you do find that a lot of things become a lot easier. I remember last week Max hit me up as all first years do and said, "Help! I need help installing Java docs." And I'm like, "That is unfortunate. You are on Windows. Good luck. If it was me, I would just install it from my package manager." And so I think that when it comes to a lot of development, I do have the capability to do stuff in which it feels like I'm I'm one with my kernel. I'm one with the package, like the package manager. I'm one with the operating system. Whereas I hear Max telling me that his computer's slow and he has to close all these processes and they're not closing, and you can't trust the Microsoft kernel to do what you want, and stuff running in the background. I don't know. So I think overall, there are definitely reasons to use Windows, and I don't think I would argue that, but one of the biggest reasons I see most of my friends still staying on Windows is because they're like, oh, Linux can't run games. And this is, although this was like a problem in the past, and like you'd have to like get specific builds for Linux and stuff, like nowadays like 90% of my Steam library runs on like Linux with no problem, and I'm able to run pretty much everything else just fine. There's a few things I have to run on Windows, but it's really far and few between at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing with Linux. It's like a lot easier to see all of the applications that are running on your computer. You can see what's happening on your computer, whereas Windows, you have to go through a lot of extra steps to see what's going on.
Yeah, it's because the Windows is much more like controlled by like the operating system stuff, whereas Linux kind of gives you more freedom. Well, this is kind of a weird segue, but kind of I guess going with the elitist route. Another big thing that you advocate for is Rust, the programming language. So, just kind of want to talk about like how you discovered the language and like how you went about learning it. Since I don't like it's not really taught in university, right? So, like, how did you kind of discover it and like oh yeah, I want to learn this and kind of go like full send with this?
Yeah, for sure. I think that this is definitely one of the things that by the time that students get to third and fourth year, they'll probably go down a path that they really like this one language, and it might be one of the like unique, quirky kind of languages. Like you got like Go is like pretty big. Rust is pretty big right now. But then you got some like other ones like Scala. That's a pretty interesting one on the JVM and functional and everything like that. And then you also got like Zig, which is like a new, sort of like Rust, but not as so and so forth. And so I think everybody will sort of have what they like a lot and what works well for them. Now, for me, like I used to be like I love C++. I loved being able to do stuff with memory and play with like my object oriented and do everything at like high speeds in comparison to what I was able to do in like Java and Python and everything like that. And I remember I was in this was I must have been third year, and I took fourth year artificial intelligence. And in this course, in the first assignment, I like you can use any language you want. You just have to like make an AI to solve to play a game. And for the first one, I did C++, I think. And then the second one, I was talking to a friend in the class, and he mentioned like that like there's this language, and then he mentioned some of the features of it. And I'm like, that sounds pretty nifty. And he's like, yeah, you should definitely try it. And so I'm like, this is the perfect opportunity. I have an assignment that I need to do. I'll give it a go. There's no restrictions on how the assignment works or anything like that. And so I gave it a go, and there's a lot of things that I didn't understand right away, and that didn't like work well for me, and it took me like a long time to learn. But just following through like the simple tutorials of like hello world, how to do stuff with variables like addition, multiplication, so on. That gave me enough of a basis to be able to take all of the ideas that I needed from like AI and implement them in the language. And so like you can pretty much do everything that you need like with like the vector data structure, which is like similar to like a Python list. And also just like the normal syntax that you use in any language. And you can solve a lot of programming problems with this, like with that amount of knowledge. And so that's sort of what got me started on it. And then since then, I've been sort of using it on and off for a lot of projects. Been like super enthusiastic about not just where the language is going, but also the community surrounding it. Because one of the big things about Rust is that the idea about documentation and the idea about community is incredibly highly regarded. And so making it feel incredibly inclusive to newcomers and learners, but also making it incredibly friendly to people who want to be educated about Rust and where they can go to find resources. And so I think it's like, I remember I went to learn Go recently, and I think one of the things that sort of like discouraged me a lot was that while I was trying to learn it, there wasn't really a good website that I could go to that led me through like a nice tutorial, and like the documentations were difficult to understand and to get used to and stuff like that. Whereas Rust, it's like I was being brought through a story of a language rather than just I don't know, like an instruction set of what you need to complete in order to make your thing run.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
I
that's the origin story.
with my like a limited experience with the Rust, I feel like the whole story aspect I understand. I feel like there's a lot of really cool like aspects of Rust that you don't see in any other languages, like things that people would want to see, but like they're just not implemented in any other language. Like one that I can think of off the top of my head is like for like when you're doing range in Rust, you can just do like one and then dot dot to like the next number. I thought that was so cool. Um, like if you want to do a range of 1 to 100, you do like 1 dot 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 99. I'm pretty sure. Right?
Yeah, and so this is sort of an interesting thing, and I think not that I want to like discourage your point or anything like that, but there's a lot of languages out there, and a lot of them do a lot of things incredibly differently. And even so, there's this idea of like paradigms on how things work. And so, if you want to achieve something in like languages like Python or Java, you might use like object-oriented methods to represent data, and whereas like maybe in a functional language, you'd represent it purely like in arrays and stuff like that. And then you go like down like a different path and use small talk and everything's in a virtual machine, and it's like this really weird experience and stuff. And there's a lot of things that you might find like a gem that you're like, wow, this I have a use case for this, and it makes what I'm trying to do so much easier, and I'm super glad that it's in this language. But one interesting thing about Rust is that Rust like advertises that none of the very few of the ideas in it are new research language ideas or anything like that. All of them were ideas that were around like 2000 to 2010. But they're ideas that just haven't been implemented as like a core feature of a language. And so specifically with Rust, it's the idea of like memory safety. And everything else is built around that. But then it can also add a lot of these like niceties, or like what's often called like syntactic sugar. And so the idea that you can accomplish, let's say you're using assembly, you're using like machine code, everything is like super beep boop and everything like that. You can do whatever you want. It's just going to take a lot to get you to the point where you're trying to express your idea. And so if it's a lot easier to express your idea in a lot fewer steps, and it's a lot easier to this solves a problem for a lot of people, then this is very helpful. Now, on the other hand, just because something works well for some people, it doesn't mean that it should be included in a language, because then that's when you have like everything in the kitchen sink that goes into language, and just becomes overcomplicated, and you're not sure the best way to do something, and there's not like you can't really just look at like a best practice guide and understand what would make sense in a language. And so I think it's really fun to learn about these new novel things that make a language fun to program in. But definitely exposing yourself to a lot of different ideas across a lot of different languages is also a really great way to go about it. And so Rust takes a lot of ideas from functional languages, which makes it feel really good when you're using iterators, and it takes a lot of ideas from like different like sort of abstractions of safety, where maybe in like Python you never have to worry about what the computer's memory is doing. You can do a lot of that in Rust too. And so it's really aiming to be the best of a lot of worlds while still being like a very low level language. And so but that being said, there's like a lot language and compiler theory around like these types of ideas, and I think it's a pretty cool field. I like exploring it a lot.
Yeah, maybe I'll gain a lot more respect for the way that Rust is constructed when I understand more about how like object-oriented programming works and how Rust is different from that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, so for example, you can go read a blog post that talks about object oriented versus empty component systems versus none of the above, or maybe you'll read like a blog post about why this database is better than this database. But or I think another big one is like why this front end framework is better than this front end framework, which is better than jQuery, or so on and so forth. Um, but it really comes down to, if you haven't tried it yourself, then you're going to not be able to have experienced the reasons at which these statements are true or false. And so, yeah, I think that exposing yourself to as much as you can is definitely the best way to get like a well-rounded view on what the different possibilities out there are on a lot of different like languages and technologies and ideas. But especially when it comes to paradigms, because like for example, you got functional, you got object oriented, you got like lots of different stuff. And then similarly, you got like web dev, you got systems engineering, you got embedded, you got game dev, like all of these different things. People are going to have different interests, and so if you're just following along what someone else says that your interest should be, then you're a lot less likely to find the things that you find cool. And you think that the range 0 to 100 in Rust is super cool, and that's awesome, and like it will allow you to solve problems in a very easy way when you come up like against like these walls that maybe in other languages would, like maybe Java, you got to do like int I semicolon I equals 0 semicolon I, so on and so forth. And so yeah, really exposing yourself to these things that you find interesting is really how you like cultivate that passion to continue and like kind of go off in the direction of computer science that you want, instead of just being dragged along by what school is teaching you necessarily.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a really good point, because like and that's kind of what differentiates, like, I guess, the whole like CS like career from like any like regular career, is that like since there's like so many ways that it can go. Well, I mean, that can be true about other careers too, but like since there's like so many ways that it can go, like self-learning is kind of like, I don't want to say inevitable, but like to a certain point it's inevitable, right? Because
Yeah,
like without, if you don't learn on your own and you're just kind of like going through like the classes that like someone is like telling you to go through, it's like you're not going to kind of get to experience what um I guess get to experience like your full potential with what the field and stuff. So yeah, that's a pretty good point that you brought up with regards to that.
yeah.
And
I feel like in
but
CS, like more than a lot of other careers, like you kind of make yourself, right? Like you can go through all the coursework, get like a B in every class, or you can just pass every class, and there could be someone doing a lot worse than you, but if they're doing a lot of work on their own time, and they're working on their own individual projects, they could still be better than you at maybe certain aspects, or like also just in general, they might be like, very very experienced with coding.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I'm just gonna kind of transition into the next kind of point with this. And I guess it kind of works well with what you were saying earlier too. Like, it depends on what you want to do. So kind of want to talk about the game that you're working on. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Talking about veloren, which is by the way, like, Forrest is working on a game called veloren, which is I guess it's better if you go through it. I don't want to
Yeah,
butcher
for sure,
anything.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting project. About 2 years ago, beginning of 2019, I feel, um, I was taking a semester off school. I had plans to go to Europe for a month, and so I wanted like a side project. And so my goal was that I wanted to. I like game dev a lot. I like using. There's like a game engine called Godot. I like it a lot. I wanted to implement some really low level stuff in it. I wanted to try and like overcome some of like the boundaries of what you might experience in a normal game engine. So I wanted to create like a voxel game. And I really like this game that came in like 2013 called Cube World. I think it's like a really cool take on like the voxel side of things, where it's a lot more focused on adventure rather than building. And so I wanted to create something like that. And so in my research of if there were similar projects, I came across this project called veloren, which was started with a lot of similar intentions. It was started by someone who wanted to create an open source version of the game and go through and just make a lot of it better for what felt good about it. And so by the time I joined, it was already like 6 months in, but they were right at the cusp of making a new like redoing the entire engine from scratch. And so I came in right at the beginning of that refactor, and so I'm like the second person to commit onto the new code base, which is pretty cool. But
Wow.
um yeah, so it's been like a really interesting project to work on since then. It's grown a lot. It's one of the largest games in the like the Rust game dev ecosystem, but then also like within the open source game dev ecosystem as well, in the sense that it's gained like a lot of traction from people who are interested in this type of game, from people who want to contribute, whether so I think that one of the really interesting things about it is that we don't just have developers on the project. We don't just have people who know how to code and do really cool graphic stuff. But anybody who comes in with a skill that we can use is pretty much given free reign to contribute whatever they like. What, like, of course, that as long as it fits under the vision of whatever team lead. But this means that we have artists coming in, we have composers coming in, writers, designers from all around the world that are able to contribute to this project, like whenever they are free, whenever they are available. And from this, we've been able to make something that's like quite polished and feels quite nice. Like right now, as a tech demo more than anything. There's a lot of content that still needs to be added to it, but it's definitely a very I think we probably have like over 200, like between like 150 and 200 people who've contributed total. So yeah, it's been a super cool product to be a part of. It's almost 3 years old now, and currently on the project I'm the meta lead, and so that's the so basically what I do is like I do like a weekly blog post. I do like a lot of outreach for different interviews or blogs or anywhere else, sort of posting on social media, and then I also do a lot of stuff with like our GitHub and our continuous integration, and so making sure that our tests work nicely, that our servers are running well, and a lot of stuff on that front. But interestingly enough, I have not done a very large amount on the actual code base itself. I've done some small things here and there, but not a ton just yet.
Well, that's that's kind of I actually didn't expect that because I thought you were very like kind of into the code with regards to veloren, but I didn't know that you're not that kind of like involved with the code and part of it.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting because I think a lot of people would like look at the stuff that I do and be like, oh yeah, you definitely like know a lot of code base. But when it comes to how a lot of the systems work, I'm not familiar in the sense of it's more difficult for me to go in to add stuff than a lot of the other developers. But then on the other hand, a lot of the other developers, they like where they shine the most is in this like pure raw development of like graphical engines and lighting and systems and world simulation and world generation. And because of these like geniuses that we have coming in and working on this, we have so many different sides of it that are just so like done in like such a interesting way that you can't see in many other AAA games because they just don't have the time and money to spend on like these types of open-ended sides of things. Now, that being said, though, since I write the weekly blog, I am like one of the most familiar with every of stuff that goes like around with everybody and who's working on what and what like the types of progress are on everything. And so so like to put in perspective, like we've done like weekly blogs since when I started 2 years ago, and so we're on like 111. We just finished 111, and so it's been like for that's been like something that I'm like super hyped that I've been able to do every single week, like for that period of time. It's definitely a pretty big achievement, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting too.
Yeah, it's exciting. With veloren, I feel like it looks like such a good game. I played when you sent me the link to do the server testing, because you guys were like testing like how many people the servers can handle on multiplayer. The game just looks so nice. It is so nostalgic. Reminds me of Cube World. Actually, I have a lot of friends that I used to play Cube World with and Dwarf Fortress with, which veloren has a lot of aspects of too. And I was messaging them all the game and like telling them about it, and they're all really hyped for it as well, which is pretty exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with where we're at, there's like if you look at a screenshot of it, there's a lot of things to take from like pretty much any screenshot that you take a look at, in the sense of sure, it's a game that looks like Minecraft, but you can also see like mountains off in the distance, and you can see like the weather patterns of like, well, not like a super lot, but we have like different like like atmospheric fog, and we have different sky, and at night there's like the aurora borealis and stuff like that. And so it does definitely look very nice, but we definitely struggle a lot with where it is in the sense of a game. And what I mean by that is, sure, you can like run around, and you can kill a lot of stuff, and you can go into dungeons, and you can group up with people, but that's such a minor portion of what a game needs to be. And you can take this as like, sort of a proof of this is you can find any game that's incredibly fun. It is like one of like the most simplistic things ever. So like, for example, like QWOP is like this character that you have running like down like a track, and you have to control it with like 4 separate keys or whatever. And it's like a lot of fun, and like there's some like really interesting like mechanics to it, and it's incredibly simple. And so with Veloren, we definitely have struggled for a long time to find that sort of level of content where when you hop into the game, you feel like you're there to play something for like a long period of time. You're not just there to see a demo of what Rust is capable of or something like that. Like, you want to be part of this progression. You want to go and do quests with your friends. You want to be involved in the, like, if we're advertising that it's similar to Dwarf Fortress, you want to feel like you're involved with like a moving world and that you're making change. Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Because I remember when you showed it to me, I definitely thought of the first thing, where it's like, oh, what a great demo of what Rust can do. It didn't really feel like a game yet, but I'm sure you guys are working on that. However, I had a budding question, and I just gotta know, have you had any people like come in and they're like absolute geniuses, but they have a super horrible attitude and they just want to do everything their own way, or like, I don't know, like their personalities aren't it, like, do you guys have to ever deal with that type of stuff since it is open source?
Yeah, so that's a super great question. I think one of like the most important things when it comes to this project is you really have to distinguish that it's incredibly different from a company. You don't have anybody who is there who is getting paid and has the potential of getting fired, and so they care about how they act, and you don't have an HR department to make sure that everybody's working well together, and you're working in the open, so anything that is said or done can be seen by anybody and can be like reposted by anybody. And so while you are in this state of being out in the public the entire time, you have to make sure that you have super strong sort of guidelines against what we would like, what you would not want to have in this type of community. And so but I think the other thing as well is to know that not like, none of us are perfect. We try to keep an incredibly flat hierarchy. We don't have the one owner of the code base who makes all the decisions, and we don't have one person who's always going to be this lead forever. But instead, we are incredibly flexible with how our teams work and how our team leads do everything, and how we like talk with players and we spend time with them. And what this results in is the community feels like it is the community that's making the game. So that's the first big thing. The second big thing is that if we hold each other accountable to behaving well and acting like in a way that is like appropriate, then you see that sort of echoing out into the community further. And then third of all, when something does go wrong internally, so let's say like one of the admins or like 2 of the admins like arguing with each other or something like that, then being able to back it off, to like moderate this from like a backed up level, is incredibly important. And I think that the reason this comes up so much is because, first of all, we have people of like very different age groups who are participating. We have students in high school who are like developers. We have university people at their jobs. But then secondly, we also have people from all around the world. And so language barriers are one of the biggest things that we face a lot of the time. What one person might say as just a normal statement might be taken and misconstrued by someone else because of the hidden intonations behind the text. And so there, like, pretty much every developer and every admin has been at some point where they got in a pretty heated conversation that naturally got worse because it's just over text and you can't convey emotion as well, and there's language barriers. But when that happens, we try to just make sure that it's resolved in a very healthy way, and we do this incredibly proactively. And so when we see stuff popping up early on, we make sure to keep discussing it internally and keep making sure that it's resolved and that people are handling the situation and we don't just brush it off. And we have seen that this has failed from time to time. There are points where developers like will burn out because they're putting so much time into this, and then they have to do school and have to do other things. And so this is something that we we know that we're not gonna be able to do perfectly, but we also don't want to pretend like we're perfect at. But instead, if we can cultivate a community that will naturally move towards like sort of goodness rather than like hatred and like misbehaving and like arrogance and aggressiveness, then like I think that's definitely the better way to go. And one of the big ways that we do this is we make sure that all developers know that their skills are valued far less than their personality in the community. And so if we have someone come in who is an expert in some field, but they're incredibly toxic and they're making it difficult for everybody else to work, then no matter what they're good at, it doesn't really matter, because we like, not to say that we can go and implement the stuff that they're going to anyways, but if they're going to like put like a negative 50% modifier on the entire development of the project because of their attitude, then that's just like a no-brainer. You get them out of there. We don't have a 100% direction that we need to go in comparison to like a AAA studio or something like that. And so yeah, I think that's like definitely a really good question, especially when people hear like the term open source project and like people are spending their time on it like for nothing and like all of this kind of stuff. It definitely makes sense to think that a lot of these situations could like arise where it gets like super toxic and like people just like abandon the project and never come back. But we know that is a potential of something that could happen, and so we try to avoid it as much as possible.
I have a question about sort of like the advertising that goes into a game like Veloren. I know that if you complete the game and it's perfect and you release it, if you don't do any advertising, then the work was kind of for nothing. Like what kind of aspects go into advertising a game like Veloren? Like I know you do the blogs. There's the Discord server. Like what kind of things does the community or do the developers and admins do to relay everything to the community?
Yeah, so we definitely don't do as much as we can. We don't put out very many YouTube videos, and we're not super active on Twitter with screenshots and stuff like that. And these are things that are not super difficult to sort of take up. You can find someone in the community who's interested in type of thing, and have them do this at like a weekly level or something like that, and then you'd have like a lot of improvement. But I think a big thing to remember about this project especially is if we were to complete the game and only the developers who are working on it were the ones to play it, then I think we would still be happy with what we did, because we're not doing it because we want it to be the biggest thing in the world. We're doing it because we think it's missing from the world and we want to see it there. And so when you come at it from this perspective, then anything we get is amazing. We were incredibly blown away when we had over 110 people on the server for like the last release party. Like at the same time, we were amazed that this many people would show up and care about what we're working on. We were amazed that the server could hold this much, like this many people. And like we were amazed by like the interactions that were happening on the server. And so naturally we're getting this feedback that is really good. We're not number hunting, and I think this is something that is something, yes, super important that we've sort of because this is an open source project, and because a lot of people are like very adverse to advertising companies and like the natural way of advertising, we've been against getting Google whatever you call it, when you can see how many people go to a website. So we've looked at other ways of tracking, like maybe just like see how many page hits we get or whatever, but we've never implemented it. And that means when I put out a blog every single week, I have no idea who's reading it. I have no idea if it's getting out to many people. I have no idea if it's literally just going to the echo chamber of the 5 people who react on Discord. But I know that as long as I do this, the developers who write a little bit about what they did get to be published somewhere. And I know that anybody who comes in and finds it interesting will have the opportunity to reach out to these developers. And so if at the very least what I am doing is creating a cycle in which developers can have good feedback about the stuff that they found interesting and put into the project, then that is more than enough for me. And so the added benefit of this is, like, the other day I just got a message from someone saying that they've been reading it since like the 31st one. So that's like 70 or 80 ago now. And so that makes me feel really good, right? Like I love to hear that someone like actually goes every week and cares about what's written and cares about the progress on it. And so if that is what motivates me, and it's not how many people, do we have 1 million players yet? Do we have like YouTubers talking all about it and stuff like that? Then that is significantly more sustainable than hitting a peak. And I think the other thing I should mention is if tomorrow, I don't know, Twitch streamers were to start playing it or something like that, the server, we have one server. It has an average of like, let's say like 5 to 10 people on it all the time. It can go up right now. It would crash at about. It might not crash. It would probably crash if you went more than 70 people on it right now. And so if there was any amount of popularity at all, then it would crash and burn. You'd only be able to play single player. There's no content single player. Nothing would come of it. Now into the future though, I think the most important thing is natural growth. If we have some crazy peak, which I think is inevitable that something like that will eventually happen, if we don't have the systems in place to mitigate like people being able to join and play, then that's basically like, well, not necessarily game over, but it's just like we probably won't hit like another peak like that. And so a lot of work is being put in now that we're at like a pretty stable place with like a lot of the graphics and combat and stuff like that. Not to say there's not a lot more to do, but we have something that people can come play. A lot of work and thought is being put into what scalable servers will look like, what a business model will look like, and what like the future of scaling the project will look like. Because that's something we've put off for such a long time, and it's worked well enough until now, but it's inevitable that it will start not working out.
So you're kind of like planning to go like the cube world route of like just letting the community come to it. I'm pretty sure that's what happened with Cube World. But...
yeah, Cube World, you had like a lot of forum posts, you had a lot of Twitter posts. Each one that came out like inspired a lot of people to like really want to know more about this game. With veloren, it's quite similar. Like you go to watch a YouTube video, maybe if someone saw like what 0.1 was and like, oh, it's a tech demo, and they look at it now, they're like, wow, this is a really cool improvement. But growth more than that, we don't necessarily need. Like we're not like our goal isn't to make money on this. People didn't come and work on this product so that they can make money. Now that being said, it is important to know like what a business model could look like, because if we wanted to scale so that 10,000 concurrent players could play on not necessarily one server but multiple like different servers, there would have to be a lot of infrastructure in place to allow this to happen, for the server cost to be supported, for people to have like versions of the game downloaded and everything like that. And so that's and so to a certain extent, this is where I'm focusing a lot of my time. I haven't put too much into it just yet. We've done like some server experiments and stuff like that on what scaling could look like on Kubernetes or something like that. But making sure that we have some plan in place for when this type of thing does happen.
So seems to me like you've got like a lot of projects going on, a lot of things, and like Rust and Valorant, but like how do you balance all this time as like a student too? Like, you know, we mentioned that you are a student still.
Yeah, and so I think I mean, I definitely don't want to say this as like advice to people, because I say this, I talk to a lot of people about this, and if I'm not in a one-on-one conversation, then I can't convey a lot of the ideas that are important about it. But I focus very little on being a student. In the sense of, I like when I go to class, it's incredibly like secondary to a lot of other things that I do. And so I focus on like a startup that I'm working on, and some contract work that I'm doing, and a lot of side products that I'm working on, and so I think instead, I'll propose it that when I wake up in the morning and I come downstairs, I'm excited to get on my computer and start working on a product that I was working on the night before. And that is something that I love having, and I felt that with very few assignments, and I felt that with like a certain work like that never like brings this amount of like enjoyment or anything like that. And so as long as this is sustainable, and it's what I want to do, then it is a grind that I absolutely love putting time into. Now, when it comes to school and assignments and learning and all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't say that I don't care about it at all. And I'm like, I like in telling you like I'm gonna be dropping out in like 2 years, like in like 6 months, I'm gonna drop out and never gonna do university, because like I've taken like a lot of fourth year comp courses. Like I don't know how many they offer, but I've taken like at least 50% of them.
Cool.
And so I've been exposed to all of these like these really cool upper year ideas that I am like super happy that I've like taken this opportunity to do. And like I should mention, you need like 1 or 2 fourth year courses in comp sci, and I've probably taken like 8-ish at least. And so for me, this is amazing. I've been able to focus on learning these other parts of comp sci that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise, and I've been exposed to these ideas that I find like really cool, and it's brought me to like really amazing places. And so that's like the first side of academics. But then the other side is being a student allows me to go to a lot of different conferences and events and competitions as a student, and participate in things that I would not have the opportunity to if I was in the workforce. And so one of the biggest examples of this is this event called Geek Week, and it's run by the government every year. And it's this massive security event where 200 security professionals come out from all around the country and like different agencies around the world, and they work on they all work on 4 different projects, and it has to do with like different like malware analysis, or like internet analysis, like so like honeypots and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So a lot of really cool products that go on. But then they also have a program called I don't know what it's called. It's a student program essentially that you can go as a student and participate on these teams. And that has been like one of the things that has propelled me the most in the security industry, is being able to go and sit down with these people who are like absolute legends from like the NSA or like whatever they have in like Britain and stuff like that, and be able to talk to them about like how they would go about like solving these ideas, or like thinking about these things, or everything like that. And so as a student, like I've like gotten much more of an investment, and especially like during COVID and stuff like that, being able to spend a lot of this time learning and like furthering myself has been like definitely the path that I prefer taking. But again, this is not a path that everybody can take, because the grind that I enjoy so much isn't something that I see in many other students. And it's completely okay to go through university in 4 or 5 years and get a job and be like live like have a life outside of that job that is not tech, and like get your paycheck and like progress with a lot of life that like you find important, and like progress with your career and everything like that. But where I am right now is like again, like I love waking up in the morning, and I love coming downstairs and sitting at my computer and being excited about the experiment that I'm going to try, or the new side project that I'm going to start, or the new technology that I'm going to explore. And granted, I know that this won't be like the case forever, and I won't want to do this like this lack of stability for my whole life. But where I am right now, it's like a really great place to be.
That's really good, and like I'm happy to hear that, because like and it's very interesting that you mentioned that like school is not exactly like a priority for you, because like for a lot of students it's like, oh, I'm going to school now, so I have to focus on that. But it's like it kind of goes to show that no, there can be something beyond that, right? Like you can, like you're mentioning side projects and stuff, like that's something that you have to work on alongside school, not just, well, not, you don't have to, sorry, I should reword that, kind of that it's not, you shouldn't just put like all your focus on like, oh yeah, I should get good grades and then get out, right? There's like so much more to explore, I guess.
Yeah, so I think like I remember my frosh week of first year, like I went to the university, and I knew that I came from my small town where nothing was happening, and I wanted to be exposed to as much as I could. And so I went to like a ton of different clubs in the first week, and I went to every single CCSS event that was going on. Like if they were running something and I didn't have class, I was there. And I remember that there was this one event where it was a guy who was giving a talk on group projects and teamwork, and I showed up at the scheduled time in the presentation room, and he was there and I was there, and we were the only ones there, and nobody else showed up.
Wow.
But then I remember that we went to, so he's like, okay, if nobody else is gonna show up, let's take this to Mike's place, which is like the pub at Carlton, and we'll just like have like a discussion there, and like I'll give it like the talk, but like over like beers and stuff like that. And of course I was too young, so I ordered my root beer and everything like that. And him and I we're very good friends still, and I appreciate so much many of the insights that I've gotten from him. But it's because like I was able to put myself out so much in like my first year, and I know that this isn't for everybody. I'm not even like extrovert or anything. I just knew that I was able to expose myself to so much more than my hometown, and so I wanted to take as much of that as I could, like advantage of it as much as I could. But that has paid off in the sense of what I've been capable of sort of. So there's this one term that I talked to some other people about this today, and it's proactive serendipity. And what it means is that if you want to get yourself into places that are more advantageous in life and will benefit you more, then you have to do it by not intending to do it necessarily. And so putting yourself in situations where it's likely to happen, but not guaranteed. And so, for example, when I go to a CCSS event and when I meet a first year student and I get to talk with them, that's like one connection that I made. Or if I go to like a coffee social and I talk with a prof or something like that, then that's a connection that I make. But as you make a lot of these connections, and as you put yourself in these places where these like not necessarily larger than life, but like larger than your world things are happening, you're much more likely to achieve things from. You're much more likely to get like more opportunities from this, to be able to meet more people, to be exposed to new ideas, and so this is something I probably like learned this term a few years ago, but it's something that I realized that like I definitely carry as like one of my main views on something, or on life rather, is that if I can go and be a part of these events and these meetups, and hear from people, even if it's a very small thing, but be exposed to this stuff, then it does nothing but boost what I'm capable of and who I am and who I know. And so when I went to Mike's place with this guy, I think another couple of people showed up. I think the then president of the CCSS also showed up, and so we were all chatting, hanging out, and then I think that's probably when I wanted to become first year rep or something like that. But then interesting. So I mean, if we carry on the story of me putting myself into these situations where these things tend to happen, the president of the CCSS at that time then went on to do his master's in the same graphics lab that I was doing some research, and we played board games every week, and we talked about game design a lot. And then he ran a course at Carleton called Intensive Game Dev, and this is like a 4th year course over the summer with like 6 people, and so I was in that course with him. And now he's teaching 1st year game dev, and I'm one of his TAs. And so I think that of course, like it does change, and there's no guarantee from this, but this is the idea of the proactive side, right? Like if you can put yourself in these situations, then looking back, I can tell you these stories of how they worked out super well. But if you're retroactively trying to fix the fact that you never did any networking in university, then you're just going to realize that where you are right now doesn't feel like you can get to the place where you want to be. Yeah, so I think that's like a very powerful term.
So it's all about being proactive from the start.
Well, rather not necessarily saying there's a start, because if right now you're like, if this implies that where you are right now isn't a place that you like, that you're at necessarily a start, or that you needed to start earlier for this to be able to happen to you, then you're not going to get any results from that. You're not going to have anything come of it. But if you can keep this mindset and say, there's like this event going on, and like let's say like next year, not really a challenge, but like next year you're on campus, and it's like 8 o'clock at night, and you're like, I'm tired from my lectures, I have like all this work and stuff like that, but I know that there's like this really cool event going on that like the Math Society is running, or something, or maybe like the geography, whoever, anything arbitrary, but you know that's going on. If you can remember at that point that going to this will put you in a place that is different than what you are experiencing in your box of a world, then making the decision at that point will be that proactive serendipity.
Like, yeah, but essentially, like, it's never too late. It's just the mindset that you have to have, because if you kind of you develop the mindset that I'm too late to do this, then it's like you start to it's kind of a vicious circle where it's like, okay, no, I can't do this because it's too late, then I won't be doing this, and yeah. So
yeah,
that's a really good point that you brought up. We have, I'm pretty sure, passed our our kind of 45-minute cap for the episode, but I did want to ask one last thing, just kind of for our very funny and interesting kind of topic of the week. And this week I wanted to ask you, would you say that a cereal is soup?
Okay. And so a cereal is soup. This is a very good question, and I think it falls into the same boat of where you categorize sandwiches. Like, so I think you can look. So you got to remember, like, if you're given like a taco, you're given a burrito, you're given a grilled cheese sandwich, and you're given a whatever else. So you can sort of put these in and out, and like it kind of goes back and forth. Now I think that is cereal a soup? This is a multi-layered question, because so cereal, I think one of the big things is cereal often goes with milk. Can you replace it with other things? But like historically throughout my life, I've always had milk. But the problem is that I'm now lactose intolerant, and so I think that this complicates the question a little bit, because as you're eating it, to me it doesn't seem like it would feel like I'm eating soup. It feels like I'm eating regrets that I'm gonna like not have fun within 2 hours.
Hey, but some soup has dairy in it.
That is true. That is true.
Like creamy soups.
Max, what do you think?
Okay, I think that cereal is not a soup because society does not think of soup when they think of cereal, therefore it is not a soup.
I agree with that because like in soup you put vegetables and stuff. You don't put vegetables in your cereal. I mean, if you could, I don't want to judge you if you do, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, well,
wouldn't.
I think that we're putting like a lot of unique definitions of what we consider soup together.
Yeah.
And so like if there's milk in something, and it's like a dairy soup, then that would be incredibly different from something that's like a pure broth soup, right? And so if we have those differences in the first place, that like you can also call you can call like just cheese on pizza. You can also call pineapple on pizza. You can also call like chocolate on pizza, like just chocolate with no cheese or whatever. And so I think when you have all of these separate definitions, of course it is what society grants as a thing.
Yes.
And it's more just that you're pedantic if you walk into a room and see someone eating soup and then say, "Hey, I like cereal too," or something like that. But yeah, I don't know.
Nice. That's an interesting outlook on it. But yeah, like you said, it's very dependent on your definition of soup. But I think it's maybe Veronica is like the only one that disagrees with this.
Okay. Let me just tell you. Let me give you a history bomb right here. Okay, so I took like a religion class last semester, and basically, what happens there, or what we kind of learned was like in some religions they say, oh, you can't eat, and like the rule of the book might be you can't have dairy with like goat meat, right? So then they safeguard that and say you guys can't have meat and milk together, like for like precautions, right? So if you said, okay, we're not allowed to have, soup, right? That's okay. We're not allowed to mix liquids with non-liquids. So I would have to say cereal is soup, even though I am also alike in lactose intolerancy.
Oh, so you're saying that because soup is like a descriptive word, and if they were to ban like
Soup.
putting liquids and solids together, then cereal would also be banned, therefore cereal is a soup?
Exactly.
Ooh, okay, that's interesting. I never actually thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Like blow your socks off.
I mean, that
I
makes
did.
sense, but I still disagree. I don't think that in general people think of cereal as a soup, therefore cereal is not a soup.
Yeah, I consider that too. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's a very
We don't-
like that's the
yeah.
only like compelling argument that I've heard. Of
That's
cereal
like,
being-
I don't know. That's this at this point it's like getting into the semantics of like what soup is.
Yeah, but I
I think
don't
it's
think
because
it's
languages are ambiguous. Like anybody, like so, since languages have existed for so long and can really define a lot of things, then you can really say that any definition that exists is just a part of like a subculture that had that as a dialect, and that from your subculture with a different dialect it means this other thing, where we have like fries and crisps, which are like two separate ways of the same English or something like that. But I think just language that have evolved from humans is normally pretty bad, especially if it's evolved for a long time. In that like you'll have like a lot of different languages that have like arbitrary genders that really don't add anything to text, and conjugations that sometimes can make sense, sometimes don't, but then even just make it difficult for people to like learn the language and stuff like that. But have you so I don't want to go on too far, but there's this language called Esperanto, which was a created language, which meant that someone sat down and just made it, and that's a very interesting language. Of course, it's like a European descent language sort of, and so it is significantly more difficult for people of like Slavic or like Asian cultures to speak it. But if you look at a lot of it, then whether you are like Spanish or French or English or a lot of other ones, a lot of the words will naturally make sense, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, that yeah, like kind of relates to what we were saying earlier, which is what society kind of defines as soup, like what language defines as soup, right? So yeah.
Alright, so I think it's about time to wrap up.
Yeah, it's time to wrap up. Thank you very much, Forrest, for
for
coming
sure.
today. It was very exciting to have you here.
Yeah, I loved talking for a long time.
You're my
Yeah.
Blessed you. She's just saying that because I'm her TA and she wants more marks.
Yeah.
What? You gave me 40%.
Yeah, I can't say that. I'm your TA.
Oof. All right, all right. Thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate it. Please, as always, give us some feedback. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. Make sure to hit that subscribe button,
Uh-huh.
like and comment stuff. Yeah, all the good stuff.
Venmo me. Anyways.
Okay, don't worry about that.
Alright.
We're not taking any of that yet.
Oh wait, can I
Right.
make an announcement?
Yes, you
Yes, go ahead.
can promote your
All right,
shit.
I'll promote all my stuff. On Saturday, veloren 0.9 is coming out, and we're trying to have the biggest release party ever. And we want to have so many people that the server crashes and burns. And
March
so,
20th or
March 20th. Yeah. And as of right now, with the code that's running, the physics is taking like half the server tick time, which means that once we get to like over 100 players, it's not going to go well. And so what I'm hoping is we hit absurd numbers and we see that everything crashes and burns, but then we get a lot of valuable information on how to make it better. Is that 6 o'clock? Wait, it's 6 o'clock in GMT, which is probably like 1 or 2 o'clock here. I don't know.
Alright, we'll check it out.
We'll check it out
Saturday.
for sure. Yeah, Saturdays.
All right.
Is that all you wanted to promote?
Let me think here. I don't use any. I'm on Discord. If you want to talk to me, talk to me on Discord. I also, I don't think there's anything else. I'm trying to
Alright.
think of something. No, that's about
I
it.
mean, Valoren. Guys, check out Valoren.
Yeah. That's about it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. All right. See you guys next week. Thank you for listening once again. And yeah, this was fun.
Bye.